Hey, y'all. Hey, hello, everyone. I'm Ann with Andale Homestead.
And I'm Sandi with Suburban Homesteader, Wyoming, Arizona.
I'm Monica from Bland's Promised Land Ranch.
And I'm Cayce from Ormsby Farms. And y'all, we have an exciting episode today. We are talking about probably one of my favorite topics ever. It gets me all giddy like a little schoolboy. And that's rebel canning. Because y'all know I'm a rebel. I'm a pot stirrer. So this is right up my alley. But I think we should have Ms. Andale do the honors of saying hello to everyone in the chat. Don't you think?
That would be wonderful. We're so glad you're here. Hey, Jennifer Ocean Homestead, all the way from Canada. Our sweet Ginger that's going to be popping all over the place from Not for Nothing Homestead. Two Doves, Bees, and Gardens. We've had a past podcast with them and loved it. Cynthia DeLott, all the way from the Netherlands. Troy Sutton, good morning. Good afternoon here in North Carolina. Hey, B&Us Odyssey. Hey, peeps. There's my Jessie from Lazy Days Ahead. Jessie and Lisa. Hello, everybody. We're so glad to have you here. Thank you. Of all the places in all the world, you could be anywhere. Now, we are broadcasting on all 5 channels, meaning Ormsby Farms, Bland's Promised Land Ranch, Suburban Homesteader, Wyoming, Arizona, Andale Homestead, and Round the Hay Bale. And don't forget to go over to Round the Hay Bale if you're not on that channel currently. Make sure that you like and subscribe, because when we get 500 subscribers, we're going to have a big old giveaway over there, and that's going to be a lot of fun.
Yes. And we have a lot of fun little giveaway gifts that we're going to be giving away. So you'll definitely want to share and send it out to like-minded people. And speaking of like-minded people, for me, another rebel canner herself, I'm telling you, she is probably, I've said this to her and to a lot of people, I had so much fun shooting the podcast with her, the 2 episodes that we did, because we're like kindred spirits. We're the same brain. So having her on and being able to squeeze in some time to come and join us on Hey Y'all Hey radio show, because BTW, it's actually Hey Y'all Night radio for her right now. And it's Blue from Blue Self-Reliance.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good afternoon.
Okay, so we talked about rebel canning on this latest episode and kind of what is rebel canning, because what rebel canning is in the United States is not necessarily rebel canning in the United Kingdom or other places in the world. Blue, for those that don't know who you are, give a little backstory on you and talk about what we said about how in the United Kingdom, rebel canning is not a thing.
Yeah, well, I'm originally from Australia and I live in the UK because I had 2 parents, one of each, one that was Welsh and one that was New South Welsh. So, sort of split between 2 countries. But in neither country is pressure canning really a thing at all. We've always used traditional preserving methods, including water bathing and air drying and smoking and all that kind of thing. So pickling, fermenting. Yeah, pressure canning's never been,
So you water bath can,
yes.
What, 90% of your stuff or pretty much all of it, right?
Anything that needs to be canned like that, then yes, it gets water bathed.
It's just a longer time, right?
It can be. It depends on what you're doing.
And you said a very interesting fact on the podcast for those that haven't listened about how canning was actually started. Did you want to?
Yeah, that was Napoleon.
Just give a little small tidbit of what that was and where it started for people, because they really need to go listen to the episode because it really is.
It was good. It was Napoleon, and he put out a decree or a competition that the first person who could come up with a better way to have transportable, safe foods for men in war and to troops would have this massive prize, which is worth something like 30 million in our money now. It took 14 years, And this fella did it. And that's where water bath canning came from. He basically did the experimenting for us.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
Yeah, and it was a little while later, there was a British guy who invented the tin can, which is where we get all the canned foods from. So, yeah.
Now, I know that all of us are canners here. We're trying to peer pressure Sandi into the electric pressure canner. Has it worked yet, Sandi? Has it worked? Our followers need an update.
I have not bought one yet. I have looked at lots of different ones. I have two issues: cost and where will I store it. And so
You can store it in your hallway, and it's only like $115 right now. Just saying.
Yeah, I
Boom,
told
boom.
you peer
Check,
pressure.
check. Done.
Well-
You can store it right back there behind those plants. I see a spot right behind you.
I don't know, I have 3 pressure canners, and so do I really need another pressure canner?
Yes, you do.
I don't know.
This is different. It's like shoes, right? You're not like, well, I already have 3 pairs of shoes. You're like, no, I'm running. I need a pair of running shoes. You don't have a good pair of running shoes.
That's
You
right.
need a good pair of running shoes. This is your running shoes because none of your other canners can do what this can do. And I feel like there's a lot of stigma though with this electric pressure canner, and I'm going to just address it right now because what makes rebel canning rebellious, right? Cayce, take me off this big square. This is weird. I don't like it. This is weird. But like, what makes it rebellious? The government says it's rebellious, or the special alphabet people want to make it rebellious. The people that you're given the little code names that make it rebellious for us in the United States to only water bath can meat or water bath can dairy or do any of it, right? That's what makes it rebellious. But what makes the electric pressure canner so taboo? Because they haven't tested it enough. Miss Anne, does it work for you? Have you
works
killed
great.
anybody yet?
I haven't killed anyone yet, thank goodness. The
Same,
convenience
same.
is that you can can up 1 jar at a time and you don't have to sit and babysit the canner.
Yeah.
It's just so convenient for leftovers and things like that. You make a great big old pot of soup and you don't eat but a quarter of it. Stick those things in a jar, put them in the pressure canner, the electric pressure canner, just 1 or 2 jars, and it's done in a flash. So,
Well, I think we discussed too why the electric pressure canner hasn't been properly tested. Has it been a funding issue? I mean,
yes.
really, because I've seen videos where very scientific methods were used, and thank you. And these scientific methods were checked. I've seen videos where they've done experiments to try to check the electric pressure canner, and even Rose Red was like, "Yes, y'all, it works." And
That's
so
right.
when you talk about pressure canning or any type of canning and people want to exclude you because you only have the ability to use a pressure canner that's electric and countertop. I don't know. I guess I feel a little rebellious, maybe a little salty in there about it. But the thing is that sometimes that's all you have. Like,
Right.
I can't pressure can in my kitchen because my kitchen doesn't allow for it. My stove doesn't allow for it, not safely. The only way I can pressure can currently is with my electric pressure canner, unless I want to go outside with my propane tank. And that might be a whole thing. I don't know about that.
I think one thing that we have said also on the podcast is, as a homesteader, you're always very busy. You're always doing like 9 things at once. And the Nesco pressure canner is kind of, as both Anne and Monica have said, are set it and forget it kind of things. That you do one little thing to seal. Okay. So you have to watch it for like 10 minutes and then you can disappear because it shuts itself off. I mean, it really is your best friend. It's my best friend. I know that for sure. But rebel canning, when I first heard of the topic of rebel canning, I'm the kind of person that if you tell me I can't do it, I want to know why I can't do it. because I'm really bad at listening to rules sometimes. I guess that's because I'm a man, and we don't like to listen to a lot of rules. Anyways, so I wanted to look into it. I'm like, why can't I do it if our ancestors more than likely probably did some type of rebel canning back in the day? Yeah. And why am I listening to, oh, I can't do it, it's rebel canning, when Blue in the United Kingdom, it's not rebel canning there. It's just rebel canning where I am. So listen, we have a bunch of canning police on YouTube, and we'll probably get a bunch of those on the different videos, but you need to do what you feel safe for your family and for your canning. We always say, do your research, know what you're doing. Don't jump into learning to can. Let's say it's your first time canning and do a rebel canning recipe. You may want to do maybe jam or something first. Get your feet wet.
Well, because Blue is here, and Troy Sutton did say, funny that salmonella isn't as much a problem in Europe, where canning is not scrutinized by the government. So Blue can help us with that as well, salmonella and various things like that. And the cases, we had some history that Blue shared with us, that sweet woman over there, telling us a little bit about salmonella and just how many cases there have been.
It wasn't salmonella that I had the numbers for, but it was botulism, which is the big buzzword, the big fear word that everybody uses. And in the last, I think it's since records began, so it's in the late 1800s, there's only been like 130 cases of botulism in this country, and the two biggest ones were caused by factories.
Okay.
So, and the ones before that, from individuals, were before we had fridges.
There you go.
We didn't even have ice boxes. So, that's the kind of stuff that it was caused by. But, the cases were mostly done by factories.
Blue, let me ask you a question. You water bath, but you don't do pressure canning. Now, are pressure canners harder to get in the UK? I know that Daz over in Australia says that they're really hard to get.
Yeah. I think people are getting like the Instapot variety over here, if they are getting one, because it's an all-in-one kind of lots of different things. Because we don't have a lot of space over here as well. But if you wanted a proper pressure canner, there's only one place in the country that sells them. And most of them are around about a week's wages for people. And people are really struggling over here, and they're having to choose whether to put their lights on or to feed their families.
Goodness.
So, they can't afford to be putting a week's wages aside for something like, a pressure canner. And that doesn't include like mason jars and 2-piece lids and all of that kind of stuff, because we don't use those either. So people feel like they can't use them because there's such a completely different system. If I was to set up a pressure canner and all the stuff that you guys have for me and what we use in a year, I would be looking at about £1,500.
Wow.
Which is almost a month's wages for Tanny.
Wow.
Now, there's no way that we could afford that, and there's no way that I would even consider purchasing something like that. So water bathing for me means that I've got my stock pot and I just use that with the jars. But we can recycle jars over here, and we can recycle the lids as long as they're not damaged, because we use like a 1-piece lug lid system. So we just keep using them until they don't seal anymore, or they get like a little pin mark in them and they have, a bit of rust going on. And that's when you relegate them to the shed for bits of nuts and bolts and things,
Well, we can do that here too. It's just that it's considered very rebellious and very taboo and old school or whatever. And it's interesting to hear that. It sounds like your pressure canner and having that set up is comparable to like getting a freeze dryer here. People put freeze dryers on layaway here because they're very expensive.
Yeah.
And so many people want them, which is great. But the supply is just not there. That and it's just so expensive. Yeah, it makes
I mean,
sense.
to have a freeze
Cool.
dryer over here, again, we would probably have to import it. But then
Mhm.
you're looking at probably, I mean, what the harvest right one's what, six grand?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's 3 months' wages for people, you know, that, and let alone having to run it for 24 to 48 hours to get it to go, you know, to do what it needs to do. That's the kind of electric costs that people just don't have the money for over here.
Yeah.
Let alone where to keep it, because the thing's the size of your dryer. You know,
Mhm.
our dryer lives in our dining room. There's nowhere else for it. You know,
Well, you
Yeah.
know, Jesse did put information up here and says the National Center for Home Food Preservation, it actually recommends against using an electric pressure cooker for canning, even if the manufacturer says you can. And we're talking about two different things, though. We are talking about
Right.
specifically the pressure canner.
Mm.
Even though we know that you could steam bath can in a pressure
Yeah.
cooker, but we're not talking about that today necessarily.
Right.
We're talking about the electric. We're talking about the electric pressure canner
Yeah.
that is not supported by I believe, the USDA.
And they are side by side in the store. So you do have to
Mhm.
watch out what
Yeah.
you're getting when you purchase. It gets a little confusing when it says electric pressure cooker. And you think, okay, that's great, but it's not. It's the electric pressure canner. Make
Mhm.
sure you have canner in the
Yep.
title.
And they're
one-
actually they
I was-
should be in our Amazon stores.
I
So
was just gonna say that it's probably Monica read my mind. They're probably in our Amazon storefronts because I love the Nesco. But I
Yeah.
wanted to kind of touch back on when we talked about botulism and you know that big scary B word that the canners throw around. And I remember watching. I talked a little bit about this on the podcast that I watched a YouTuber. I won't throw her name out there, but that botulism cannot live in freezing temperatures. It cannot live over boiling temperatures and high acid foods. Okay, so that's why vinegar based stuff you can water bath can. One thing you have to remember also with food that you pressure can, most of the time, now some people do it, but most of the time you reheat your pressure canned food back up to that boiling temperature to heat it back up. The botulism spores, if you will die off from bringing it back up. I think if people think of that when they're being so scared about pressure canning, it can ease your anxiety a little bit. I know it did with me when I first started doing that. Like with soups, I pressure can leftover soups. You're not going to eat cold soup right out of the can. I mean, if you do, you go girl. But most of the time, you're heating it back up, and that's going to kill the spores. One thing that if I have a jar that is a faulty seal that I pressure canned, one, you'll need to use it right then to either bring back to a boil, or I put it in the freezer. I put it in Ziploc bags in the freezer because then again, the spores it can't live in freezing temperatures. I just wanted to throw that out there for people that wanted to pressure can but are nervous about that big bad B word, botulism. I'll get off of my soapbox now.
So, Sandy, have you ever done anything as far as what would be considered rebel canning?
Well, you can like fruit cobblers. Is that rebel canning?
I think so. I think
Um,
so.
You know, I think you can can a lot of things that you just don't realize you can so that it can preserve it. I mean, people can cakes and seal them up and then have them later. You know,
Mhm.
they can breads. So I just think there is a lot of things that you can and just do some research because you know, watch several videos, read stuff online, go to your library and see all the different things that you can. I mean, if I went downstairs, I probably have 15, 20 canning books. Maybe
Right.
maybe I have more than that.
I think the one thing that sticks out in my mind of my canning supplies is butter. I have canned some butter. And I know that's supposed to be a big no, 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 no. But I have run out of butter before and walked in there, pulled out that jar, and it's been amazing. So, yeah. And now Jesse says, I thought rebel canners were just canners that were canning in the South.
Yep. That's exactly it.
Ain't that
Not so, Jesse.
Well, I canned cream cheese before. And let me just tell you how amazing it is to go and get a jar of cream cheese out of your pantry that's been sitting there for 6 months. And you're
Wow.
like, oh, yeah, I got cream cheese. Not that we use cream cheese often, but what would happen is we would open up like a half a container and only need a little bit. And then it would go bad or whatever it was. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to get a bunch of these sticks of cream cheese, the little blocks, and I'm going to can the cream cheese. And yeah,
Mhm.
it's been wonderful
That's
to be able to have it and pull it out of the pantry when I don't have it in my refrigerator because we don't use it that often. So it's nice to be able to have it and not have to worry about having to go buy it specifically for whatever I'm
Right.
having.
Now we have a couple questions in the chat. Lila wants to know, she says this may be a dumb question, and there's no dumb questions here. I can promise you. Only ones that are not asked. The jars that don't seal with the pop sound. Can you try and reseal the contents in another jar? Absolutely. You can redo it, reheat your items, put it in another jar with a newer lid, and do it again. That's one of the advantages of having the electric pressure canner is you can do just one jar at a time if
Yep.
something doesn't seal. Personally, what I do is stick it in the fridge and use it right away. But I have jarred and canned, and you don't really have to put it in another jar. You just have to. You can use the same jar.
within
You just
24
have to
hours?
change
Yeah.
the lid. Mhm.
I think it just depends on how much you want to reheat the contents inside. So
Right.
like if it's vegetables or something that you've already canned, if you try to can it one time and then it doesn't seal, you're going to take the chance of making the mush by doing it, I think, a second time. That's what
Yeah.
I would be
Yeah.
more concerned about is putting it
Yeah.
through that heat process a whole other time and then having it come out to be kind of mushy.
Right.
Yeah, it's not the canning part, it's the texture of whether you want to actually eat the food.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like a lot of us have canned meat. You know, I've canned chicken, I've canned deer meat, elk meat. And in fact, I told Casey that one of the tricks that we do here in Wyoming is we put a slice of bacon in our deer meat when you can it, and it gives it a really nice flavor. So it's just things that, you know, you learn from other people. Some people like to add onions in with it when they can their deer meat just to give a different flavor in there.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
we'll definitely be using that come deer season here in about a week or so. I want to say, since we talked about cheese
Yes,
too,
ma'am.
another rebel that we tried, I know me and Monica have done it, is canning the nacho cheese. And y'all, I know it's so bad for you. I know, but sometimes you just want to be a fat kid and cut a jar of that terrible plastic cheese.
Yes. I literally bought a big thing yesterday.
Because we buy the big giant number 10 can at the Costco or the Sam's Club, and then you pop it open. And when you pop it open, you know you got to use it pretty soon. So I can it. I know
Yeah.
that's rebel, and I know that cheese for some people is gross, but I like it.
Well, I think
I love being a fat kid. That's right.
Yeah, I think it works better though because it's like 80% plastic, so it seals really well. But I will say it is real. I just bought one yesterday, Cayce. You're literally reading my mind because I bought one yesterday and I was like looking at it in the store and I'm like, oh my gosh, I really shouldn't buy this. And I'm like, there's only like 2 left. They might be selling out forever. So I picked it up, put it in my cart, and then I was like, so excited when I got home. I'm like, I am 100% recanning this tomorrow. So that'll be me today. I have like a bunch of other stuff to can up, but I am putting them in smaller jars because having them available on my pantry shelf in little pint jars, you know how much money it saves us? Because when we want to have some sort of like queso or something, Eric's like, hey, you know, you want to pick up one of those jars of nacho cheese from the store. And I'm like, yeah, I absolutely want to go spend $4.50. I want to go spend $4.98 or $4.58 on a jar of just nacho cheese. No, I don't want to do that. I'm gonna go in my pantry and get my little pint jar that I know I only spent $10 on for a 10 number 10 can. And I have all these little pint jars. So yeah, much better. So
now, has anybody reconstituted cheese powder into cheese sauce and canned it?
only you, Casey.
Oh,
You little rebel, you.
well, listen, because that cheese powder is the same cheesy nacho plastic that
Yes.
you buy. So I mean, why not? If you have it, use it, right? What about you, Blue? What's the one canned item that you've done that you've gotten the most backlash from on the canning police here on YouTube? Huh?
Spaghetti bolognese.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, I don't know. I don't know that for
People don't like you canning noodles, or is it the
I
meat?
don't think
I
it's
think
just
that's what
the
it is.
noodles,
It's like because it's got the meat and the vegetables and the noodles and all of the things,
How
and it
long
was
do you-
leftovers, so it's fully all cooked. It had been
Yeah.
all previously cooked, so I just sort of jarred it up and threw it in, and yeah, people didn't like that. I think partly as well there was a big jar in the middle that was about that far out of the water, which is probably not the best thing to do, but the boys actually ate that for their tea that night, so it's not like it was just a cheap trick way for me to heat it up so that they could eat it for that night. And I just went, there, you can have that one. And then they had that one. So, people got really upset about that.
But you have a whole video on that.
Monica
I have
is
a whole video on
leftover
that,
queen there, so you see her mind is turning. Huh?
I'm already going. I'm like, ooh, I can that. Because I mean, like, I can all my leftover, I can all my leftover sauce. I can, anything that I have that's leftover. I've canned roast beef and potatoes before. I didn't put it on YouTube. But I mean, I have a jar of roast beef and potatoes, like mashed potatoes. I throw the mashed potatoes in. It just melts around the roast beef and just sits there. And it looks pretty nasty, but otherwise it tastes amazing when you crack it open. It does. It tastes just like a plate of mashed potatoes and roast beef that got all mixed up together. It is so good, but it don't look good. But they can SpaghettiOs. Why not? Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, like, I do know that there were a couple of mistakes in the video. There was, and I'll hold my hands up to that quite happily, and say I done messed up. So, but I probably would have canned it, like put it in the water bath for probably 2.5 to 3 hours because it's got the meat content in it. But I didn't do that. I did it for like an hour and a half.
But for me, when I've canned noodles before, things with noodles, I haven't really liked the texture of the noodles later. So now I usually, like, I'm canning, if I want a chicken noodle soup, I'll just can the other stuff and then I'll add the noodles when I heat it up again. Just because personally, I just don't like the texture of that. Yeah. But I think it just depends on what you want to do. Try it, and see if it works for you.
I wonder if you didn't cook the noodles as hard. Like if you just got them a little sloppy wet, a little bit.
That's what I was just thinking.
I tried that too.
It didn't work.
Because when you're canning it, it's canning for a long time. It's sucking up all. If you don't cook them enough, then it's sucking up more of the liquid that's in your canning jar. And I just personally just don't like the texture of it.
Yeah,
and I can understand that because it can be quite a tricksy thing to actually can. The way that we do our spag bowl though is like it's not traditional. Everything gets mixed up, and then like in less than an hour, like the spaghetti's taken up all the sauce anyway. So you just shove it in the jars, and it's not got any more liquid to take up. All it is heating through. So so it doesn't really change texture, which is a good thing. But yeah, if you do put it in with other liquids like with chicken noodle soup and stuff like that, I've the same as you. I find it not so yum.
Well, I'm learning all the rebellious things to do now.
I know.
Yeah,
I
and
know she's taking notes.
what we always say: do your own research.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
talk to canners, talk to people, read stuff, watch videos. You decide.
And
That's
do what's
right.
best for your family. I mean, because as much as the canning police on YouTube want to leave those wonderful comments, they not eating your food. You not eating my food. It's okay. Don't worry about yourself. What's that little funny gift? The little girl in the back. She says, "You worry about yourself."
You worry about yourself.
Police can do.
That
You
is
worry
funny.
about yourself.
I
And
mean,
worry
I
about
have to admit, I don't really look like I have daily doses of food poisoning. You know,
Hey.
I'm not like, yeah, I'm healthy.
There you go.
We're able to still talk on this podcast. So that means we're alive. So nothing has killed us yet. But y'all, this has been a wonderful episode. Y'all know I love talking rebel canning and canning period. Let me just say that. I love talking about canning period. And it was so much fun having Blue on. We hope we can steal her away next Friday because her part 2 is coming out of Rebel Canning. We're going even deeper into the rabbit hole that is Rebel Canning. Thank you everyone who came in today. I hope you went to each one of our channels, gave us a thumbs up. Definitely go over to Round the Hay Bales YouTube channel because once we get to 500, we are doing a giveaway. So definitely hit that subscribe button, share it to like-minded people, and check our podcasts out. And we will see y'all next Friday on another episode. Thanks to Jesse and wonderful Ginger for doing all the modding and
Yes,
chats. It really does save our life, and you don't know how much we appreciate it.
that's right.
But we will see all of y'all next Friday. So bye, y'all. Bye.
Bye, y'all. Bye.
Are you enjoying the Hay Bale topics? To learn more, click on the Linktree link to get all our product recommendations along with discount codes and more. Are you enjoying the Hay Bale topics? To learn more, click on the Linktree link to get all our product recommendations along with discount codes and more.
Hey, Monica, did you know it's now even easier to listen to Round the Hay Bale podcast?
What?
We're back.
How easy.
And now live every Friday.
With new topics and a new time.
Don't forget, a new host.
Yay, that's right. Sandy joins the panel for Hey Y'all Hey
Ooh,
radio show.
Now,
Really
on Fridays
now.
at 11 a.m. Central.
Hay Bale
We'll see
every
y'all
Monday